So, Dr. Suhail, Dr. Ahmed, what do we mean by this session in the first place? Because most people run and then they look back and say, what were we talking about? So what do we mean by this session? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And just give me your first minute and then the 1 minute. What is a definition of success of this session? Can we make sure the microphone works? That's the first definition of success. Okay. So we are not controlled by technology. We are augmented by technology. Right? Augmentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Samir, you have inspired me by your passion always.
Thank you.
And I felt that in UAE, if someone takes telemedicine serious, you're one of them. So the topic today would be, how can we implement telemedicine in layers, in private and public sector, and what are the models? How can we make it successful? Just not bring a product, bring a solution. So we want to talk about solution today, not a product.
Dr. Ahmed, your thoughts about this session?
So I was glad to hear that you said we're going to have a real discussion, not a pseudo discussion.
We've seen many pseudo discussions where everything was planned ahead of time and then just blah blah blah. We're sincere and as-sidqu junnah. So we believe in sidq, honesty, especially in UAE.
Thank you very much. And I'm also glad to know what you just said about UAE as well, as this is a market ripe for these kind of things. So physician density, that's what the topic is. And I can go into definitions, but I think it's more important to talk about what it really looks like on the ground. So by definition, the World Health Organization kind of classifies as a region having about more than 2.3 physicians per 1,000 of population is what you need to have an adequate delivery of healthcare. Less than that is not adequate. And I can tell you by WHO's definition, 40% of the countries on the planet have less than 2 or even in the 0.5 region kind of physician density. So they're talking about matching patients with their physicians, and if that's the kind of density you're going to have, you would not have adequate healthcare delivery. And what we're talking about here is, how do you bridge that gap? You cannot bridge that gap if you continue to have those many people for that kind of population. And the only way you can do it is by using technology. And I don't want to go too much into that. I'll wait for your next question. We can talk about it.
So let's start with the forest and then the tree and the leaf. Most mistakes in companies especially, and that's why they fail in telehealth, and also in others, is they start with the leaf, hope for the tree, and then beg for the forest. So let's start the right way. Why would clinicians resist the implementation of telehealth, which is the big one, and telemedicine? In your point of view, this seems to be true, although we try to avoid it. And so there are some champions like my colleague from UK and others. Why is that the case? We need to talk about the why before the what and the who. And how can we quickly address this? This is a big question. But
it sure is. So let me give you a few examples. So I'm in upstate New York. I'm at the University of Rochester. I also teach at Stanford. And at Stanford, we started something called the Bedside Clinical Elective kind of fellowship. So the professor at Stanford, Dr. Abraham Verghese, you may or may not have heard of him. His book is called Cutting for Stone. So he says the best tool that a physician has is his hand, because it's the compassion, it's the empathy, it's the ethics and all that. And when I talk about telemedicine to him, he says, oh my God, I don't want to talk about this because there's no ethics, there's no compassion, there's none of that interpersonal connection in telemedicine. So he talks about that. And I agree with that. But at the same time, let me give you another example. So I'm from Rochester, and the biggest company based there is called Kodak. You have heard of Kodak. They make cameras and films and all that. In the late 1980s, the digital revolution came. And Kodak said, we don't want this. Who's going to buy these kind of cameras? Film is always going to rule. They used to make X-ray films. That's how they made money. And you know what happened? 3 years after that, Kodak is no longer in existence because they didn't keep up with the technology. Same thing is happening in medicine. Physicians, we keep saying, oh, this is not for us. They will never replace us because we have this last mile human connection. Fine, I agree with that. But the thing is, where is that last mile when you don't even see the patient? That's what we're talking about. So a lot of speakers discussed about Why do we feel threatened? Well, we feel threatened because it's a different way of doing things. It's natural, it's human. But at the same time, the new generation, I can tell you, I teach the med school, and I'm talking to the students, and as I'm talking to them, their faces are blue. Their faces are blue because they have their phones open, and they're checking what I'm teaching. They're checking their Facebook, they're checking their girlfriends or whatever, but they're all not connected to me, they're connected to this neural network. That's how they learn. We don't teach that in medicine. They want instant access to everything, instant access to buying stuff, instant access to getting a taxi, instant access to things. When it comes to medicine, they say, you got to call a physician, wait in a week to go wait in a waiting room, see a physician, he may or may not see you. All those things, and people say, what's wrong with these guys when everything else is instant? So it's the change which disturbs us.
Dr. Suhail, experience from Pakistan, from you and Dr. Zaki and others, what are lessons learned? I'm less interested in what was done, but what did you learn, you, as a physician, when you created some of the projects in Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan? What did you find is an element of change that helped in implementing this? Is it mostly the need of large countries, mountainous? Is it geographic? Is it the new generation versus the older one? And we have a name for this in the States, which I will not mention here. It doesn't mean anything here. So, just thoughts.
I'd like to address this question, but I've just received a message that there is, it's not being streamed right now. So I'll take 10 seconds to just connect your laptop to the streaming. If you just allow me, please.
The major concern in healthcare, you've heard me say this 100 times. Number one, it's reactive, not proactive. If you don't believe it, please see me after the session. Second thing is it's advanced, but not reliable. We confuse reliability with advancement. You can have the best technology with the worst results. Garbage in, garbage out. And the number three, and this has nothing to do with my friends from UK, the only hospital that has the right name is on Great Ormond Street. It's called the Hospital for Sick Children. So I have a friend called John Deanfield. I went to see him, he's a cardiologist, and I said, that's the name of a hospital. Because truly, we are not into healthcare, we are into sick care. We are hoping that the transformation with the technology will move us a lot more. I was talking to this gentleman from Jordan, standing on the booth of his company. We're talking more about prevention rather than treatment.
Thank you, Samir. I've been implementing telemedicine in private and public sector. And I have felt that the resistance in two sectors is different. In public sector, the problem is not doctors. Doctors do want to change, but the financial restraint and then less the regulatory restraints, they stop the systems being implemented. Now that is public sector. Another problem in public sector I find is the hardware and the bandwidth. Because in villages, in far off areas, they have to do extra hardware and software and structure to implement the technology they want to. So the overall, the cost factor, I think we have Punjab Information Technology Board director sitting here as well, and we were discussing it last night, that the cost factor matters for governments, public sectors. So no matter you bring a Porsche there and want to sell it in the price of a scooter, they will say, can you give us two? That is government sector. So that psychology of the implementers in the government sector is not of quality, is of cost. That is the problem in government sector and private sector. In private sector, the problem is actually doctor resistance. I haven't got time to learn something new. I've got 10 patients in my clinic this afternoon. I've got to take my wife to shopping. Tomorrow morning, I'm starting my vacation. When would I learn the new technology? My private practice is okay. So that is where the change has to come in. What change? You can see more patients in the same clinic. 10 space clinics, you can see 20 patients or 15 patients, because you can follow up the old patients on telemedicine and see the new patients in physical appointment. So you can be more efficient, but because what mind doesn't know, eyes do not see it. So there has to be a competitor to that consultant who is doing telemedicine, maybe a younger competitor, and then he will set an example. Look, I am younger than you, I've got a better practice than you. and that will threaten the other consultant. So I'm actually giving you a very practical scenario. I'm not being diplomatic here. As he said, it's going to be a true dialogue. So I'm going to follow that lead from you. Yes, the doctors are the resistance to a better healthcare. How ironic is that? We are stopping a better healthcare to be implemented because we don't want to learn, or we haven't got time to learn, or we haven't got drive to learn. Now that is a big resistance. When you don't have drive to learn because I've got everything sorted. So my advice to you is that you haven't seen how good you can be, and that resistance we have to really take off and take a next step.
Okay, let me challenge prior speakers. So, do we have to be bionic or are we simply augmented? Is word bionic turning off people from AI or turning on people in AI? Not to challenge anyone, but let me explain to you where I'm heading with this. My colleague, Dr. Akram, spoke about lean. I did several studies on lean, and one of the reasons why people avoid it is the jargon, the sushi. People hear these words, Kaizen and Gemba, and I'm Master Black Belt and this, and they hate it. When you simplify it and make it palatable, it sounds good. Do I have to be bionic if I don't look at a map going from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore in the United States, which is north, and just use my Google map? It's simply, I'm the same person. Driving my car, do I become unusual? No. Why do we have to consider telehealth, telemedicine, AI as so wow? Is it possible that we're making too much out of what's coming up? And I'll discuss this in the afternoon today. With that in mind, going to the next layer, density is a challenge almost everywhere. We spoke even about the UK system, which has one of the better data and one of the more organized one, if not one of the best. What happens, how do we look at density? And I'm looking at density not only as the foundation of all healthcare, which is primary, but also the different layers. What is the role of telehealth, telemedicine briefly? What's a possible model for using it appropriately? And why are we not doing return on investment routinely in every project we do? That's why I told you I love your lecture. Because at the end of the day, I talk about the science of improvement. I say if you don't do two things, you'll never succeed. First is instead of looking at the dose of aspirin, 75 or 100 as a cardiologist, who cares, or 325, tell me about compliance and given appropriately at the right time. And second is return on investment. Those two are always missing in improvement and change management. Thoughts? One of you.
So the density question is interesting. So there are some similarities and there are some differences between when we talk about the US and the UK and we talk about Pakistan or the third world. In the developed world, especially in the US, most of the population lives in the cities. Most of the physicians are in the cities. There's a huge country which is kind of underpopulated but is underrepresented by healthcare professionals. Now, counter that with people in the third world, where most of the population lives in the villages, but the physicians are still in the cities. Now, one thing is common. Physicians in both places live in the cities. They don't want to go to these other places. But that geographic challenge is something that cannot be met unless we have something which closes that last mile. And when I say that, it's not some pipe dream that we have which is going to come down the pike. We have that. All of you have smartphones in your pockets right now. All of you have that capability. All of you have that information that was ever accumulated by humans ever since we evolved from fish or whatever. So, but the thing is, we have to change that information to knowledge. And when physicians come and talk to me and say, hey, this is going to overtake us, and machines are going to do what we are doing, and we feel really threatened. It is never going to happen because eventually what we have is right now through these systems is information. This is not knowledge. People often confuse that. So we have to translate that to knowledge. So connecting through electronics, converting that information to knowledge is something which is not going to happen in the future. It's happening right now. So to your point, Sam, is that when you mentioned can we coexist with bionics? We are already doing that. We all have that in our pockets right now as I speak. There was an interesting discussion about ethics just now. All of those things are going to follow. I'll give you one small example. Somebody mentioned about disruption. And the biggest disruption happening right now is in healthcare. And what is disruption? It is when you go away from the way you do things. It has got to happen in healthcare because it's not happened in healthcare. It's happened everywhere else. And I can tell you right now, in one of my lectures later on, I'll talk about this. Companies like Google, Amazon, Aetna, CVS, these are huge companies. They decide humanity's future. They are coming into healthcare because they're seeing, hey, this is one field in which nothing really has changed. We have to come in and start changing things. I was just talking to my friends about, there's all this thing about violation of your privacy and all these things that people get concerned about. Actually, people are not concerned about that. People are not concerned about the privacy. They're concerned about access. They're concerned about getting in touch with somebody who can look after them. People are, they have given over the TVs are monitoring them right now, and they know that, and they don't care. They don't care that in healthcare as well. So I forget what your question was, but
no, I mean about density. That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, again, I interject just to show you where we are in healthcare, okay? So I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. So a patient comes to me and needs a coronary angiogram. So we're gonna stick the radial artery or the groin and inject a few, cc's of dye. They have kidney disease. We tell each and every single patient the same number. Based on your creatinine, you have a 20% chance that your kidney function will get worse. There is almost 2.4% depending on data, or 3.6, that you may need some session of dialysis and some number of permanent dialysis. Is that acceptable in healthcare? And we have data with billion and trillion of data to give us more specific, artificially intelligent driven thoughts and ideas about how to give these numbers for precision medicine. So, while being in telehealth, but adding the AI component a little bit more now, pushing it, so now we're going into the leave, is with the issue of density, which I was told is the focus here. How many physicians do we have appropriately in the location to address specific needs, which is a huge topic. We're going to shrink a little bit. Let's marry now the concept of telehealth, telemedicine, and AI with three thoughts. Number one, telemedicine, telehealth is no longer only Skype, right? It's not just a matter of communicating remotely. Now we can do interventions. I want to talk about this a little bit more. Like, we saw a skin lesion, but my colleague wasn't given enough time to say what could be done to scan that lesion with unbelievable databases. Second thing, so is my question, the first one clear? Okay. Second thing I want to bring up is, when we put those two things together, the feasibility of doing it financially. Because there's always a thought that companies are in the East and humanity is on the West, and there's no bridge and nobody is talking to anybody else. Yet my feeling is the company needs the physician and the physician needs the company, and the patient should be the focus. The third thing is, why are we still enjoying looking at the map when there's a Google map? I think I'm missing something here. There's something missing here. I will have more patients through telehealth. I'll have more patients through telemedicine. I'll have better time to focus, as my colleague from South Africa said, and others from UK and others, to do the right thing to do. Am I going to have still to enjoy looking at the map and opening the pages like we do in healthcare? So we're going to summarize 5 minute, and then end, is a proposed solution, because so far what we typically do in conferences is talk. I call it conferencing mandibular tachycardia. Talk, and nothing changes. You rarely get a summary paper or a white paper after a session, and then we remember 7% within a week, 1% within a month, and then we may remember whether the hotel food was good and the service was good. So can we have, from your heart and your brain, Suhail, this is your life, I know how much you care about this, a proposed solution, and can we bring it a little bit more GCC, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Turkey, our region, so we can benefit from expertise from the West?
I'm glad you asked this question, because right now I'm working on a project which engages telemedicine with blockchain and artificial intelligence in one. So I'm going to try to make it very simple.
So what's blockchain, in case we don't have expert on blockchain?
Blockchain is a distributed ledger system where it's not only currency, it's not only cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. There's a non-crypto part of data management in blockchain. What happens is that whatever data goes on a system stays on that system. It's a distributed ledger. It's decentralized. So if something goes wrong with the center, that computer still has the data as integral, immutable form of record, medical record in our case. That is blockchain. In blockchain, we have hashtag every transaction you make. Like if you access patient's medical record, there is a timestamp called hashtag. And patient will allow you through a smart contract. Then the patient will let you use the electronic medical records. So that part, I presented a paper along with Patientory. I'm ambassador of Patientory, which is a blockchain healthcare company in Atlanta. And I presented a paper to them, and we are now doing a joint project of putting telemedicine and blockchain in one circle. So what that will do is that if your patient says, doctor, is my data safe with you? I'm traveling. You can tell them, look, blockchain is going to guard you. Now why blockchain? If the patient is reading newspaper, TV, they would have heard about blockchain. In UAE, there's a big conference going on in 2020 about blockchain. So much has been invested in blockchain that you benefit from the publicity, not the product. You benefit from the publicity of the confidence. People say, yes, blockchain is safe. So put that on a telemedicine software, make it one, make telemedicine even more data efficient. And this is exactly what we're doing. Samir's artificial intelligence, what that will do, data automation. Samir has to ask 10 questions to every patient. Well, don't ask. Let the computer ask it. And let you come at the end, like a nurse talking to a patient. So he comes in when the computer has done his bit, or its bit. I shouldn't say his or her, its bit. And then he takes over from the critical decision making. Now he says, I can be replaced. He may be scared. Actually, you should be happier because someone is doing the talking for you and still involving you when the patient wants to know, will I survive or not? So he's now more listening. You can get this data back in the form down to 60. You can say, well, I want all the 65 years old patient who came to me in the evening, had one history of chest pain, who were diabetics, and they were separated from their lives, from their wives. That much data he can get from artificial intelligence. And that is the beauty of data collection through artificial intelligence. So imagine now telemedicine here, blockchain here, artificial intelligence here. Put them in one bucket. That becomes the most efficient electronic medical record system you can talk about. Patientory, blockchain, they're all working on it. I'm sorry if I made it complicated.
Okay. Dr. Ahmed, I'm going to give you the other side.
Okay, so
I'm the CEO of a major healthcare system called ABCDEFG till Z. Why would I care about all of this? It's wind and it blows. I have Blockbuster video and it will not close. I have a Kodak camera and 20% of them, by the way, were Lean Six Sigma trained. I've been doing it that way and it winds and it blows. What is a true incentive to sell these ideas? Obviously, it is the right thing to do if done properly, ethically, and regulated. But how do we, I was telling Dr. Zaki, now you saw it, we were pushing the wall, and I said, if he pushed it with me, critical mass will not be accomplished. It's not resonating, I assure you. I told my colleagues in Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi that there is this conference. I expected at least half of the people I told to be running after this. Only one is coming at 1. So there is something that we need to do so this becomes more feasible. Criticism I've heard about all companies is too technical, not solution driven. That the company is not able to bring the concept of solution. Is that true, or being fair to companies too? Please.
So I can tell you, so I'm at a university hospital. There's a total of about, so ABCD is one of the, let's say it's a university hospital. And there are about, I don't know, about 160 or 180 university hospitals in the US. I'm going to bring it back to the UAE as well. I can tell you each one of those CEOs is trembling in their boots right now because what they see is that their hold on healthcare is being eroded from under them. And why is that? Is because all these huge companies are entering into healthcare and they're saying, you're doing it the wrong way, we will do it the right way. And they're saying that because we think differently. We are now in a mode of accessing technology and using it on an instantaneous basis. We no longer want to go and wait in a physician's office and wait for a referral. In NHS, you wait for 180 days to see a dermatologist, this, that. By that time, you have metastatic cancer. We don't want any of that. So these companies are getting scared. And what can they do? So we've been thinking about that. So what we have come to the conclusion is that where we fail is our access. This is the biggest issue for big systems in which we limit access because we are this doctor with a degree on the wall, and how dare you come and talk to me without an appointment and all that. That is going to be our failure. So we are trying to change that dynamics by opening the doors, increasing access, and the only way we can do that is to have these kind of initiatives. So I can tell you, we have issues with coordinated care. So we discharge patients to home, they go home, they don't take their medications, they come back. So we are putting in systems so we can monitor them when they go home. We are improving access to specialist care. We are increasing patient engagement. And what's also happening is, we'll talk about this, is predictive analysis. So we were actually just talking about the NHS and predictive analysis is how can we tell a patient's going to get sick before they get sick? So right now in England we have this, in UK, in US we have this as well, something called the news score. So if the patient's admitted to the hospital, we can predict about 10 hours before they go into sepsis that they're going to go into sepsis. It's all based on technology. It's the vital signs and the computers and the white cell count, it all kind of goes into an AI system. It's all about pattern recognition. That's how, when we go to med school, what do we learn? We learn pattern recognition. That's what we do at the end of the day. We look at a thing and our brain says this could be it. Why couldn't computers do that? Computers are good. Neural networks are excellent on pattern recognition. So there's certain things that do very, very well. So prediction of disease before it comes, those wearable technologies and all that, I'd be interested as a CEO of a hospital. I don't want patients getting really sick by the time they come to the hospital and they die. So all these things, when we think about that, are making me change my mind to change the way I practice.
So we have to end the session. Thank you very much.